Kia ora everyone, and welcome again to another look at all things cycling here at Sky Sport in New Zealand. It has been crazy as it has been for the last few months. There is so much going on. We've had the Giro wrapping up. We're in the midst of the Vuelta, and locally as well, we have the Tour of Southland coming up too. Joining me as always is Del Woodford. Del, I want to start with the Giro. That's obviously wrapped up a memorable win for Tao Geoghegan. What did you make of that last week in particular?
Wow, I just can't believe how great a race it was. Like, if you look at the first week of the race and look where Tao Geoghegan was in that first week, technically up until Geraint Thomas crashed, that's who he was riding for. And then to go from sort of the mindset of being a support rider and gradually moving your way up and, winning that stage and thinking, gee, maybe I can win the Tour here, it was unbelievable performance by Tao, but also a fantastic ride by Joe Henley. That was just something else. The stage, I think it was stage 20, Rowan Dennis was like a man possessed. Like, he rode the whole peloton off his back wheel till there were just two riders left, the guys that finished first and second on the GC. That was some performance by the former world time trial champion. And when he's on, oh, what a rider. That was the ride of the race for me. He just destroyed them. And, that's what set up the win absolutely, perfectly for Tao Geoghegan.
Yeah, Dennis was absolutely instrumental, definitely towards the back end in particular. I was having a think about this, and it seems like a classic sort of Ineos win, really. They had a bit of adversity at the start, Thomas crashing. Then they just pivot. They win 7 stages. Geoghegan wins. Everyone's sort of been talking about Jumbo-Visma this year as the super team, but I think this was a nice reminder from Dave Brailsford and Ineos just about how strong they really are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually their best ever Grand Tour result. They've never won that many stages in a Grand Tour. The yellow jersey, the white jersey, all those stage wins. Fantastic tour for them. And, to have a young Brit, 25-year-old, just take it out. It's just going to send, their cycling community was just going to go crazy again because, with Froome dropping off and, who's next? Well, there he is. He's right there. And also next year, they've also got young Tom Pidcock coming through as well. They've signed him as a, outstanding rider at cyclocross, mountain bike, time trial road. So another young Brit coming through to strengthen them. And I think we're going to see a totally different, Brailsford's already said, a different approach to the old days at Sky. And that's going to be good for cycling because these young guys, they love to attack. Attacking to win stages and still getting the GC result, I think, is just going to be sort of the future of Grand Tour cycling. It's great to see, the attacking racing, and they did it brilliantly. Like, you couldn't have written that script any better. They wouldn't have been able to write that script themselves.
Where do you think it leaves them for next year? Because, like you mentioned, obviously they're going to have Geoghegan, they're going to have Thomas, they're going to have Bernal, they've got Adam Yates coming, and they've of course Carapaz as well. I mean, they're going to be so stacked for next year.
Well, they can approach all the Grand Tours with a lot of confidence, can't they? So, and that's a real strength to have all those names you just mentioned, all Grand Tour contenders. How do you manage that? How do you manage the egos? I guess that'll be some of the challenges. But, they'll go into most of those, or all those Grand Tours with 2 leaders, I would imagine. And, we don't know what sort of season next year is going to be as well. So, if it's another compact season like we've just had, or whether it's going to be a more traditional season, because I think the season we've just had has really suited the young riders. They're dialed into training on Swift. They come out really fresh, eager to race. The older guys need a lot more racing. Sort of their season starts traditionally January, February, and they build up to July. And, so we haven't seen some of those older guys have such a great season. They won't be out of it if it's a full season next year, but they're going to have to change the way they race a little bit. And I really enjoyed Nibali's comments about the young guys in the Giro, how impressed he was with the way they rode their aggressive style of racing. He just admired it. And, that's really, nice comments from one of the greats of the older generation.
Absolutely. And moving on to the Vuelta, where one of those names I just mentioned, Richard Carapaz, has sort of taken control after Roglic got the lead early, and then he hasn't looked too flash in the last few stages. What have you made of the early stint in the Vuelta so far?
It's brutal. It's unbelievably brutal. I just can't believe the climbs they've hit in the first week. And there was a lot of talk around hitting those big climbs because of the weather. And it's, the first, we're getting into the winter season. If we don't get the mountains done early. Then I had a look today at what's coming up. And that's insane as well. I think, stage 11, 12 is just massive mountains again. This has got so much racing still to come. The Vuelta, I think, for me, maybe, and it's hard to say because the Tour was so exciting, the Giro was so exciting, but the Vuelta may yet be the most exciting race. If you look at how close everyone is, you look at what's to come, who's going to survive? Like, they're already attacking each other. Insane race. Carapaz riding exceptionally well. The team will be super motivated now after the win in the Giro d'Italia. He's in good form. So, he's going to be a hard man to pin back, but there's so much to come. Roglič's certainly not out of it. I think he's 40, 30 seconds down. Like that's really nothing in this race. And overnight, George Bennett going in the break, moving up 3 places back into the top 10. So they've got some cards to play. And if they change their approach and start to look at doing those sorts of things again, having a rider like George in the top 10 means it takes a lot of pressure off Roglič, but also gives George some opportunity as well. So I'm super excited for what's coming up in the Vuelta. Aguilera, it could come down again to the individual time trial. Yet another Grand Tour may come down to the individual time trial and the closing stages.
I think George has been really impressive. Actually, we've seen. I think he's probably been the second strongest rider in the team. Dumoulin seems to have just fallen off a cliff. His form just isn't there. Kuss looked good to start with, and then I think he had that bad day. He lost 9 minutes or so. So George sneaking into the top 10. He's been there or thereabouts on most days. I think he's been going quite well.
Yeah, he's looked really good, and I think it's great to see him come out of the Tour de France. How he rode through that with those rib injuries, great World Championships and recovery, come into this race and put himself in a position to really challenge. Of course, the team leader is going to be his first port of call, but having someone like Sepp Kuss 9 minutes down now changes George's role quite a bit. Kuss is going to have to ride hard for both riders, as well as Dumoulin and the rest of the team as well. So George becomes not fully protected, but one of the riders they've really got to look after and make sure that he's still in the mix, because he's 229 down. That's absolutely nothing. A break goes, the mountains that have come. If something happens, you'll need George up there, and it's great to see him looking so good, Henry. And I just wish that stage win would come, because he so deserves it. But a podium would be nice as well.
Absolutely. Another guy who's looked good, and I think it's been really nice to see, is I guess the re-emergence of Dan Martin as well. We know he's had his injury troubles in the past, but he's one of the guys that's really impressed so far, and he's looked really good.
Yeah, Dan is a great rider. I like his racing style. He's always a little bit aggressive, and he was pretty emotional with that win the other day. He's nice and handy there on the general classification. Quite a few things have still got to go his way, but his form is getting better as the season's gone on. So, yeah, really great to see him back to his best, challenging. Great for Israel, who just again announced another of the older generation, Sepp Mark, as a signing, which I think is a really good signing for that team for next year, bringing a lot of experience with Froome and Mark for the classics. To look after some of the young riders coming through, and for Dan to have such a strong, if he has a really strong performance on this tour, it sets them up really well. And he's already said he's super excited to ride with Chris Froome next year. So yeah, Dan Martin, I'd love to see him on the podium. It'd be great for Israel Cycling and their team looking towards next year as well. So yes, it's great to see those new teams. Also, Alberson, their ride this year. Now they've cemented a place for the tours for next year with outstanding performances. So it's going to be exciting going into 2021, whatever that looks like. But the riders we're seeing now, the young riders performing, some of the old guys like Dan Martin coming back, Froome, using the Vuelta to build up for next year. We're going to have another, something to really look forward to come January, February.
And I think importantly as well, we talked about last week about the COVID concerns during the Giro. The first rest day in the Vuelta, there were no cases at all. So clearly that that ASO bubble, I guess you could call it, seems to be working quite nicely.
Yeah, it's pretty effective, isn't it? And it's great to see, because Europe's going through a pretty tough time right now. And, the riders had a pretty rough time in the Giro with it. The organisers, want action taken against EF Education and Jumbo for, the not wanting to start and wanting to pull out of the race and stop the race and that sort of thing. But I think, the riders' voice, that they have to be listened to, and that's not happening enough. They're very rarely united, the riders, as one voice. But, that day they shortened the stage. It was absolutely the right thing to do. There was nothing to achieve riding 260 kilometres in the pouring rain when the, immune compromised at the end of 2.5 weeks of racing. So, good on them for taking the stand. And I think really the Giro organisers need to take some responsibility for the holes that they let into that race bubble. And, like you say, ASO, they know how to run these events. It's nice and tight, fantastic to see no positive COVID tests.
And switching things up, moving more to the local scene now, we obviously have a big race coming up. We'll call it the fourth Grand Tour maybe, but we have the Tour of Southland, which gets underway. The 64th edition gets underway on Sunday. We've only got 3 international riders this year, obviously with the COVID restrictions limiting that, but there's still a really good sprinkling of New Zealand talent in there. And we've also got a new race director, Sally Marr, as well. What are you expecting, first of all, from the Tour of Southland?
Well, Southland always brings out, some really great racing. It's a really tough race. It's not the most mountainous countryside, but they've got some of the biggest climbs they've ever gone up coming up in this year's 64th edition. So some nice changes to the route, nice changes to the mixing the stages up a little bit. So it's not going to be super predictable. The wind can play a big part. The weather, you can either get beautiful sunshine, you can get sleet, hail, snow, massive crosswinds, or you can get all that on one day, or you can get none of it. So Southland's a really exciting race. It's one of the iconic events on the New Zealand sporting calendar. Certainly in Southland, the whole community gets behind it, and that's why it's been what it is for 64 years. And I think Hamish Ferguson, probably one of the most knowledgeable in the sport of cycling, said there's 13 either past or present world champions in the race. So if you think a domestic field with 3 international riders, and there's 13 world champions there, either Corbin Strong, current world champion, and Lawrence Pithy, one of the young guys coming through, Aaron Gate. If you look at the field and the quality of those riders, it's going to be one hell of a race, and it's going to be super exciting. I think as at stage 3, Henry goes up the Remarkables climb. So that's probably the biggest climb a bike race in New Zealand's attacked. It's, 10 or 12 kilometres long, average gradient of 10%, a couple of bits. I think in the first 2K you hit a piece that's about 13, but it's relentless. It's just hard the whole way. So stage number 3, that's going to be a really vital stage of the tour. And then the following day, it's backed up by a totally different climb, much shorter, but at maximum gradient of 22%, the mighty Bluff Hill. So 2 different styles of climbers might win those, or the same guy might win both. Who knows? It's going to be a brilliant race. There's a lot of riders. It's a really good quality field, 836 kilometres of racing. It takes in some of the most stunning road stages in the country when you head up through, around Riverton to Otapri, and then you head up into Te Anau, across into Queenstown. I think that stage, that remarkable stage, in distance it's not far, but it's going to feel a hell of a long way. When you start, I think it starts Mossburn, heads up, you go around the Devil's Staircase beside the lake. It's a long day, and you got that big climb to come. So it'll be interesting to see the tactics. There's some, Vink, Aurum. What would have to start is probably a couple of the favourites for that stage.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't wait for that climb in particular. That's going to be great to see. Drilling into some of the specifics, I guess, when you scan through the teams, obviously one that sort of catches my eye straight away is obviously Black Spoke with James Oram, as you mentioned, Luke Mudgeway in there, and Aaron Gate too. They probably have the advantage, don't they, of they're a team. There hasn't been much racing this year, but they have raced together, and you'd expect an outfit like them to have a pretty strong presence throughout the race.
Yeah, you're 100% right. They would have to start, I don't know who would start as favourite, whether it's defending champion Michael Vink, Aaron Gates, one before, or Oram on this course with that big climb. Like James is a sensational climber, and we've probably never seen him climb at his absolute best in New Zealand, because the climbs haven't really been big enough for him till now. But he is one of the top climbers. I believe, given the right opportunity, he could be doing what George is doing right now as well. So James, for me, is if he's on form, that stage will really suit him. They've also got some good support with Ethan Batten there as well, another rider who I think goes pretty well and is a little bit underrated. May struggle on that big long climb, but we'll find out. Michael Vink, he's one of the classiest riders around. He's classy off the bike. He's really classy on it. He climbs really well. He time trials really well. He's got a good team with Dylan Kennett, to sort of ride shotgun and keep him out of the wind as much as possible. Bailey O'Donnell as well in that team. So that's really strong. And then we've got the King of Swift, Ollie Jones, jumping off the trainer, and he's a sensational on Swift, and seeing him in this race. Won't see him go up the mountains, but he'll be pretty good in some of those big, hard, flat crosswind stages. He can generate a lot of power. And James Fichet, you mentioned him a few weeks ago when we were talking about what he had done in Europe and he's a big talent. So it might be time for James to really step up and try and take control of a race like the Tour of Southland. But it's going to be hard. Stage 3, the hardest stage. Take the jersey there. There's a lot of racing to come and defend. So it's all, Southland is about timing for the jersey.
Yeah, like you say, Vink obviously looking for 3 in a row, sort of has to go and is definitely one of the favourites. I'm quite intrigued to see how Fouché goes. He's been building nicely for a while. He's had a bit of a stint over in Europe. He's back now, and there's a lot of other young guys in there. Corbin Strong went really well last year. And then you've got Ruben Thompson, Lawrence Pithy, who signed for the FDJ Conti team. So there's a lot of young guys in there as well that you'd expect to have a bit of fun and see what they can do.
Yeah, totally. And great to see those boys sign for FDJ, and big opportunity. So, they'll want to, I guess, finish the season off, or sort of start it off or finish it off from New Zealand's racing point of view. Lawrence Pithy, we know how good he is. He's really strong. I haven't seen him on any really big climbs, so that'll be a nice test for him. We know he can time trial well, and Ruben as well. So good to see them. Now, a lot of people will be looking at them now and expecting maybe a little bit more from them since they've seen that signing, because it's one of the big teams, and you sign for their development team. It's great to see another New Zealand rider being picked up by one of the World Tour teams in the development program. We've got Finn Fisher-Black riding for Jumbo, and now these guys. It's really, really exciting to see. And then the local riders as well. You can't discount someone like Matt Zenovich. Really aggressive, knows the roads. He will be up there chasing some stage wins, I think, as well. So there's some good local Southland riders, and as you mentioned, Corbin Strong. He's a Southland boy as well. So. World track champion. He's going to be good in the sprints. And he proved last year he could climb all right as well. So there's a lot of strong teams, and it's going to be a really exciting race to watch and follow.
And good as well to see a few of the NZ track guys there, the likes of Jordan Kirby, Campbell Stewart, Regan Goff. I mean, we know Campbell Stewart can be pretty lethal on those sprint finishes, can't he?
They're going to be really dangerous as a unit. If they're all riding as the same team, it would be a bit scary, really. It's nice to see them have spread out across some teams, but the power of those TP riders when they hit those crosswinds and that they're at another level. So, if they get organised on the front on a really tough day, you want to be hanging on, because they're fast. And I know Jordan come back from Australia and is quarantined for a couple of weeks and is rearing to go in this race. And you don't become world individual pursuit champion unless you've got a really big motor. And so the riders we've talked about, Gates great in those situations as well. Mudgeway, they know where to be. So knowing the roads, knowing the course is really, really vital. Keeping your wits about you, know when the wind's coming up, know what's in front of you. Because if you get caught out, we see it at the best riders in the world at the Pro Tour. If you get caught out in Southland, though, it can be worse than that, because it can blow and you can turn left and you're in the gutter and you might not come back. Because if you get that New Zealand men's endurance team all on different teams riding, the guys behind won't be chasing. They've got teammates there to just let it go. So you've got to be really on your game in Southland. And it's, the one thing with the Tour of Southland in 64 years, I don't ever think there's been a lucky winner. They've all been good bike riders.
Absolutely. And you sort of touched on it, that people always love talking about this, but this is definitely a race as well that's affected by the weather, isn't it? I mean, who knows? It feels like perhaps we're sort of moving into summer, but you never know with something like the Tour of Southland, do you?
No, you don't. It's a little bit later now. Of course, it used to be an October event, early October. And, when Paul Jessen, the year he won, it was the famous floods down in Southland. And that there's been times where there's, the wind, the snow that's cancelled stages up the Coronet Peak. And, can remember, the day into Mossburn, probably the coldest day in history of the Tour, with, some of we won't name them, but some of our great riders are in tears on their bikes because it was so cold. And the first year they put Bluff Hill in, and guys having to walk up the hill because today they ride up there with they have a 39 on the front and about or smaller, and a 28 or 30 on the back. Well, back in the old days, and I think when they first put it in, no one had seen a hill that big in New Zealand. You're 42 chainring and you're 20 on the back if you were lucky. And that was the biggest hill in the Tour. Apart, there was Bluff was thrown in, and then you had just out of Lumsden, Jollies, and there wasn't really much else. But the elements played a massive part, particularly in October. But you can still get that now. The seasons are crazy all over the world, and the wind on those big flat roads is what can make this race so tough. The hills, what's in front of you. Those big climbs, you either can get up them in the front group or you can't. But in the crosswind, you've just got to be on the A game, and you've got to be in that front echelon, and you've got to be in there working. Just trying to hide in there doesn't work. And Southland will throw plenty at them. You can be sure of that.
So it's going to be great to see. Obviously, we haven't had the biggest calendar locally, so it'll be nice to see a big race like this rolling through, and it'll get underway on Sunday. Just a reminder as well, of course, you can catch all the Vuelta action with George looking pretty good at the moment. That one is on Sky Sport throughout. Thanks again for your time, Del, and hopefully, we'll probably have to catch up soon and debrief the Tour of Southland, and hopefully have some good news about the Vuelta. Maybe Dion Smith gets lucky on a stage too.
Let's hope so. Yeah, thanks very much, Henry. It's a pleasure.